New Orleans is a city of bright lights, crowded streets, dark alleys, and secrets hiding behind every corner. But beneath its lively atmosphere, something far more dangerous is taking place. Wealthy men are coming to the city for a reason that has nothing to do with tourism, business, or entertainment. They are hunters, and their prey are human beings. At the center of this violent world is Yancy Butler, portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme, a tough, independent former Marine who has fallen on difficult times but still carries the discipline, instincts, and courage of a trained soldier. Chance is the kind of man who does not easily trust people, and he prefers to keep his life simple. He works temporary jobs, takes whatever honest work he can find, and tries to stay away from trouble. But trouble has a way of finding him. The story begins by introducing a man named Douglas Binder, who is desperate to earn enough money to survive and return home to his wife. Binder is approached by people who appear to be offering him a job, but what he does not know is that he has been selected as prey in a deadly game. Behind the scenes, wealthy businessman Emile Fusson, portrayed by Lance Henriksen, has created a secret hunting operation that turns human beings into targets. Fusson and his partner Pig Van Cleef, portrayed by Arnold Vosloo, provide wealthy clients with an opportunity to experience a kind of hunting that money normally cannot buy. Their customers are not interested in deer, wild boar, or other traditional game. They want something more dangerous. They want to hunt people. The victims are carefully selected individuals who are vulnerable, desperate, or struggling financially. They are promised money, transportation, or some other form of assistance, but once they accept, they are placed into a nightmare where armed hunters pursue them through the streets and abandoned areas of New Orleans. The rules are simple. The target must survive for a certain amount of time, and the hunters must track him down. The people paying for the experience treat it as entertainment. To them, the victim is not a human being with a family, dreams, and fears. He is simply a target. This horrifying concept establishes the central conflict of hard target and immediately creates a world where wealth and power have been separated from morality. The hunters believe money gives them the right to decide who lives and who dies, but their confidence is based on one dangerous assumption, that the people they hunt are powerless. They are about to meet someone who refuses to play by their rules. Meanwhile, Yancy Butler is introduced as a man living on the edge of society. He is strong, physically capable, and highly experienced, but he is not looking for another war. His military past has given him skills that make him dangerous, but it has also left him with a desire to live independently. Yancy does not want to be controlled by anyone. He has no interest in becoming part of another organization where someone else gives him orders. He survives by taking temporary work and moving from one opportunity to another. His situation changes when he encounters Natasha Binder, portrayed by Yancy Butler. Natasha is a young woman who has arrived in New Orleans searching for her father, Douglas Binder. Her father has disappeared, and she refuses to accept the possibility that he simply abandoned his family. She believes something has happened to him and is determined to find the truth. Natasha is intelligent, persistent, and willing to take risks, but she is unfamiliar with the dangerous environment surrounding her father's disappearance. She needs someone who knows the city and can protect her, and that is where Yancy enters the story. Yancy and Natasha first cross paths under difficult circumstances, and their relationship begins with mistrust rather than romance. Yancy sees a woman who is determined to find someone in a city she does not fully understand, while Natasha sees a mysterious man who appears capable of handling himself in dangerous situations. Their first interactions establish an important contrast between them. Natasha is driven by emotion and determination because she wants answers about her father. Yancy is driven by instinct and survival because he has learned not to become emotionally involved in other people's problems. Yet, when Chance learns that Natasha is searching for Douglas Binder, he begins to suspect that the disappearance may be connected to something more dangerous. At first, he does not know the full truth. He only knows that people are behaving strangely, that Natasha is being followed, and that her father may have become involved with people who are not what they appear to be. Natasha asks Chance to help her search for Binder, and although Chance initially hesitates, he eventually agrees. This decision changes his life. As Chance begins investigating, the movie slowly reveals the organization behind the disappearances. Fouchon and Van Cleef operate with cold efficiency. They are not ordinary criminals who act impulsively. They have developed a professional system for their illegal hunting business. They find desperate people, study their backgrounds, arrange the money, prepare the locations, and provide wealthy clients with weapons and equipment. The hunters are given information about their targets so they can track them effectively. Fouchon is calm, sophisticated, and calculating. He does not behave like someone who thinks he is committing an extraordinary crime. Instead, he behaves like a businessman running a private service. His confidence comes from the belief that money and connections will protect him. Pick Van Cleef is more aggressive and physically intimidating. Together, they create a dangerous combination. Fouchon represents the organization and strategy, while Van Cleef represents violence and intimidation. Their clients pay enormous amounts of money for the opportunity to become predators. The victims, meanwhile, are given almost no chance to defend themselves. The entire operation depends on one idea: the belief that poor or desperate people are disposable. This is what makes the villains of Hard Target so disturbing. Their violence is not random. It is organized. It is profitable. It is entertainment for people with enough money to purchase another person's life as a game. As Natasha continues searching for her father, Chance discovers clues suggesting that Binder was not simply a missing person. Something more deliberate has happened. Chance's instincts begin warning him that Natasha is also in danger. He becomes increasingly protective of her, even though he knows that getting involved will bring unwanted attention. His military instincts return naturally when he senses a threat. He begins observing his surroundings, identifying potential enemies, and anticipating attacks. Chance may be living as a drifter, but his training has never disappeared. It has simply been waiting for a reason to return. That reason arrives when the people behind the hunting operation realize that Natasha is investigating them. Suddenly, she becomes a problem that must be controlled. Chance becomes a problem as well because he is standing between the hunters and their target. The movie begins building its central confrontation: professional killers who believe they are the ultimate predators versus a former Marine who knows exactly how predators think. Chance is not simply strong. He understands strategy, movement, terrain, and survival. He knows how people behave when they are hunting someone because he has experienced combat himself. This gives him an advantage that the wealthy hunters do not expect. They are accustomed to victims who panic and run. Chance does not panic. He fights back. One of the movie's key themes begins emerging here: the difference between hunting and surviving. The wealthy hunters see the game as entertainment because they have never been forced to fight for their own lives. Chance understands the difference because he has experienced situations where survival was not a game. For him, danger is real, pain is real, death is real. This makes his attitude toward the hunters completely different from the attitude they expect from their targets. As Natasha and Chance become more involved in the investigation, the danger around them increases. They are followed through the streets, confronted by criminals, and forced to escape situations that become increasingly violent. Chance begins using his skills to protect Natasha, and the two gradually develop trust. He learns that she is not simply searching for her father because of sentimental reasons. She genuinely believes that something terrible has happened to him and wants justice. Natasha also begins seeing the man behind Chance's tough exterior. Beneath his aggressive personality is someone who has his own sense of morality. Chance does not like being controlled, but he also cannot ignore someone who needs help. His decision to protect Natasha becomes a personal choice rather than a job. Meanwhile, Fouchon realizes that the situation is becoming more complicated than expected. The disappearance of Douglas Binder was supposed to be another successful hunt. The victim was supposed to be eliminated and the evidence was supposed to disappear. Instead, Binder's daughter has arrived asking questions, and a former Marine has become involved. Fouchon does not immediately view Chance as a serious threat. He believes that enough money and enough men can eliminate any obstacle. This arrogance becomes one of his greatest weaknesses. Fouchon has spent years surrounding himself with people who are afraid of him or motivated by money. He rarely encounters someone who is willing to challenge him without caring about financial consequences. Chance is different. He does not want Fouchon's money. He does not care about his reputation. He simply wants to stop the people hurting Natasha and uncover what happened to her father. As the investigation continues, Chance discovers that the hunters have been operating for a long time. Their victims come from different backgrounds, but they share one thing in common. They are vulnerable. Some need money, some are homeless, some have families who depend on them. The organization exploits their desperation. This gives the movie a deeper social dimension beneath its action. The villains are not simply killing people for pleasure. They are taking advantage of economic inequality and turning desperation into entertainment for the wealthy. Chance's own financial situation makes this particularly significant. He understands what it feels like to have very little money. He understands what it means to accept a job because you need to survive. That is why the idea of people being hunted because they are poor or desperate disgusts him. Chance may not have much, but he refuses to believe that a person's life can be assigned a price. This moral difference places him directly against Fouchon. The conflict is no longer simply about Natasha's father. It becomes a battle between two completely different ideas about human value. Fouchon believes money creates power. Chance believes character creates strength. The hunters believe victims should run. Chance believes predators should be confronted. As the tension rises, Chance and Natasha begin uncovering more evidence about the organization. They learn that Douglas Binder may have been targeted because of his financial situation and that the people responsible have a systematic method for choosing victims. The more they discover, the more dangerous their investigation becomes. Every clue brings them closer to the truth, but every clue also alerts the hunters that someone is following their trail. Fouchon responds by increasing pressure. He sends men after Chance and Natasha, expecting that superior numbers and weapons will solve the problem. But Chance's military instincts allow him to survive attacks that would overwhelm ordinary people. He uses the environment around him, turning streets, buildings, vehicles, and abandoned locations into tools for survival. The action begins becoming more intense, and the movie establishes the physical style that will define Chance's journey. Jean-Claude Van Damme brings an athletic fighting style to the character, combining martial arts, acrobatics, speed, and physical strength. Chance is not portrayed as an unstoppable superhero. He can be injured, surprised, and overwhelmed, but he possesses the determination to keep fighting. This makes the action feel personal. Every confrontation becomes a test of endurance. The hunters have better equipment and more resources, but Chance has experience, instinct, and an unwillingness to surrender. Natasha also begins becoming more active in the investigation. She is not simply someone Chance must protect. She is determined to find her father and understand why he disappeared. Her courage creates a strong partnership between the two characters. Chance provides physical protection and tactical knowledge, while Natasha provides determination and investigative motivation. Their relationship develops naturally as they face increasingly dangerous circumstances together. At the same time, the wealthy hunters continue treating the situation as a game. They prepare their weapons, study their targets, and enjoy the anticipation of the chase. Their attitude demonstrates how completely they have lost their sense of humanity. They do not see the victims as fathers, husbands, sons, or individuals with their own futures. They see them as points on a map. Chance's presence threatens this entire system because he refuses to accept the role of victim. He becomes the hunter who hunts the hunters. This reversal is the heart of the movie. Fouchon believes he has created the perfect hunting experience, but he has accidentally placed himself against an opponent who understands hunting better than his wealthy customers ever could. Chance's military background means that he knows how to track movement, identify patterns, and anticipate attacks. More importantly, he knows that fear can be used against the person who creates it. The hunters expect their victims to become frightened when pursued. Chance uses their confidence against them. He lets them believe they are in control until the moment he turns the situation around. As part 1 moves toward its conclusion, the mystery surrounding Douglas Binder becomes increasingly connected to the larger conspiracy. Natasha is no longer simply looking for her father. She is uncovering an underground operation that has been using vulnerable people as targets for wealthy killers. Chance is no longer simply helping a woman find a missing relative. He has become a direct threat to a criminal empire. Fouchon is beginning to understand that Chance cannot be frightened away easily, and Van Cleef is eager to confront him directly. The stage is now set for a violent battle between a man who believes human life is priceless and men who believe money gives them the right to take it. Chance has entered a world where the rich pay to become hunters, the desperate are turned into prey, and survival is treated as entertainment. But the hunters have made a serious mistake. They have chosen a target who knows how to fight back. And as Chance moves deeper into the dangerous streets and hidden locations of New Orleans, the line between hunter and hunted is about to disappear completely. The real hunt has only just begun. The deeper Chance Boudreaux, portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme, becomes involved in the disappearance of Douglas Binder. The more he realizes that what initially looked like a missing person case is actually connected to a carefully organized criminal operation operating beneath the surface of New Orleans. And while Natasha Binder, portrayed by Yancy Butler, continues searching desperately for her father, Chance begins to understand that she has unknowingly stepped into a world where human lives are being bought and sold as entertainment. Natasha had come to the city believing that her father might simply be missing, but the clues they have discovered point towards something far more disturbing. Douglas was not simply another person who vanished from the streets. He was selected, tracked, hunted, and killed as part of a secret game organized by wealthy men who have become bored with ordinary forms of entertainment. Their money has given them access to almost everything they could want, and because nothing seems exciting anymore, they have turned murder into a sport. Emile Fouchon, portrayed by Lance Henriksen, is the man who organizes this terrifying business, and his partner, Pick Van Cleef, portrayed by Arnold Vosloo, helps him carry out the hunts with ruthless efficiency. Fouchon is not a man who needs to raise his voice to demonstrate authority. He speaks calmly, dresses like a businessman, and approaches murder with the same detached attitude someone might use when arranging a private event. That calmness makes him even more dangerous because he does not see himself as a monster. In his mind, he is simply providing a service to customers who are willing to pay for the ultimate thrill. His clients arrive with money and weapons, while Fouchon provides them with information about a human target and turns the streets of New Orleans into their private hunting ground. The target is usually someone vulnerable enough to be manipulated, someone who needs money badly enough to accept a dangerous offer without understanding what is really happening. Once the hunt begins, the victim is given a limited amount of time to survive, while the hunters track him through the city. If the victim manages to survive, he receives money. But most of the time, the hunters expect the game to end with a bullet. Fouchon believes the system is nearly perfect because the victims have no idea what they are entering until it is too late. Chance represents something completely unexpected, a person who refuses to behave like prey. When Chance first becomes involved with Natasha, he does not know how far the conspiracy goes, but his instincts immediately tell him that something is wrong. He has spent years developing the ability to recognize danger before it becomes obvious, and the strange behavior surrounding Natasha's investigation triggers those instincts. He notices people following them, watches the way strangers react to Natasha's questions, and begins understanding that someone wants her to stop searching for her father. Chance has no personal connection to Douglas, but he sees Natasha's determination and recognizes that she is walking into a dangerous situation without fully understanding what she is facing. His decision to help her is therefore more than simple kindness. It becomes a matter of principle. Chance may live on the margins, but he still has a strong sense of right and wrong. He refuses to allow people with money and power to decide who deserves to live. Natasha initially sees Chance as a mysterious drifter with a violent side. But as they spend more time together, she begins to understand that his toughness comes from experience rather than cruelty. His military background has taught him how quickly ordinary situations can turn deadly, and his instincts often protect them before Natasha even realizes they are in danger. Their relationship gradually changes from an uneasy partnership into genuine trust. Chance learns that Natasha is not willing to abandon her father, while Natasha learns that Chance is willing to put himself in danger for someone he barely knows. This bond becomes increasingly important because the enemies they are facing have almost unlimited resources. Fouchon can hire men, provide weapons, obtain vehicles, gather information, and manipulate vulnerable people. Chance and Natasha have none of those advantages. They have only their determination and the information they can uncover. As their investigation develops, they begin piecing together the pattern behind the disappearances. People who seem to have vanished for unrelated reasons may actually have been victims of the same organization. The targets are chosen carefully, and their desperation is used against them. Someone who needs money for food, housing, medical treatment, or family expenses is much easier to manipulate than someone with financial security. Fouchon's organization understands this perfectly. They do not need to kidnap random people from the street. They simply need to find people who are desperate enough to accept an offer. This makes the operation particularly cruel because it turns poverty into a weapon. Chance understands this because he knows what it means to struggle financially. He has taken temporary work and lived without the comforts that wealthy people take for granted. He knows that desperation can force a person to make choices they would normally never consider. That is why the hunting operation disgusts him. Fouchon takes the weakest moments of people's lives and turns them into entertainment. The wealthy hunters do not see themselves as criminals because they have convinced themselves that the victims agreed to participate. But the agreement is based on deception. The targets do not know they are entering a fight for their lives until the hunt begins. This distinction becomes central to Chance's understanding of the enemy. The hunters believe the victims are responsible for accepting the offer, while Chance sees the entire system as exploitation. As Chance and Natasha get closer to the truth, Fouchon realizes that the situation must be handled before it becomes public. His organization depends on secrecy. If the police discover what is happening, the entire operation could collapse. More importantly, Fouchon's wealthy clients could become exposed. He therefore decides that Chance must be eliminated. At first, the hunters underestimate him. They see a former Marine living a rough life and assume that superior numbers will be enough to defeat him. But Chance's military training makes him very different from the desperate civilians they normally hunt. He knows how to use cover, how to move through unfamiliar environments, and how to remain calm under pressure. He also understands that the people chasing him have one major weakness. They are accustomed to being the ones in control. Chance begins turning their confidence against them. When armed men attempt to intimidate him, he refuses to respond the way they expect. Instead of running blindly, he studies their movements. Instead of panicking, he waits for the right moment to strike. This creates a new kind of danger for Fouchon's organization because every failed attempt to eliminate Chance gives him more information about the people hunting him. Each encounter reveals another part of the operation. Chance begins recognizing the patterns of the hunters, and the hunters begin realizing that they have created a problem they cannot easily solve. Meanwhile, Natasha continues trying to uncover information about her father. Her investigation takes her into places she would never have visited alone, and Chance repeatedly has to protect her from people who want her to stop asking questions. Natasha is brave, but she is also emotionally vulnerable because every discovery reminds her that her father may already be dead. She has come to New Orleans looking for hope, but the evidence increasingly points toward tragedy. Chance understands this, but he does not treat her like someone who needs to be kept completely in the dark. He tells her what he discovers because he believes she deserves the truth. Their relationship becomes stronger because they face the danger together rather than pretending it does not exist. At the same time, Fouchon and Van Cleef prepare for another hunt. Van Cleef is particularly interested in Chance because he enjoys physical confrontation and sees the former Marine as a worthy opponent. Unlike Fouchon, who thinks strategically, Van Cleef is more interested in the violence itself. He wants to prove that he is stronger and more dangerous. His confidence is based on years of successfully eliminating targets, and he believes Chance will eventually become another victim. But Van Cleef does not understand that Chance is not simply fighting for himself. Every time he confronts one of Fouchon's men, he is fighting to protect Natasha and expose the operation. That gives him a motivation that money cannot provide. The hunters are fighting for entertainment and profit. Chance is fighting because he believes someone has to stop them. This difference becomes increasingly important as the story develops. The action intensifies as Chance and Natasha are forced into a series of dangerous encounters. The city itself becomes part of the conflict. Narrow streets, industrial areas, abandoned buildings, vehicles, warehouses, and dark corners provide opportunities for both sides. Chance uses the environment instinctively, while the hunters rely on their weapons and numbers. The movie's action style emphasizes physical movement and direct confrontation, with Chance frequently using his martial arts skills to defeat opponents who appear to have the advantage. Jean-Claude Van Damme's physical performance becomes a major part of the character's identity. Chance is not simply a man who carries a weapon and shoots his enemies from a distance. He is a fighter who uses speed, kicks, punches, improvisation, and athletic movement to survive. His combat style reflects both his military training and Van Damme's martial arts background. The result is a character who feels different from the typical action hero of the period. Chance is tough but not invincible. He takes hits, gets injured, becomes exhausted, and sometimes finds himself surrounded by multiple enemies. What separates him from the hunters is his ability to keep thinking while fighting. He understands that strength alone is not enough. Timing, positioning, and awareness are just as important. As Chance begins defeating more of Fouchon's men, Fouchon becomes increasingly frustrated. His carefully controlled operation is starting to unravel because one man refuses to disappear. Every failed attack creates the possibility that more evidence will be discovered. Fouchon therefore begins considering a more direct approach. Rather than simply sending ordinary criminals after Chance, he wants his most capable people involved. Van Cleef becomes increasingly determined to confront Chance personally. Their eventual confrontation is not simply another fight. It represents the collision between two completely different forms of violence. Van Cleef uses violence because he enjoys power and believes fear makes him superior. Chance uses violence because he is trying to survive and protect someone else. Both men are physically capable, but their motivations are completely different. This distinction gives their conflict more weight than a simple action sequence. Meanwhile, the wealthy hunters continue participating in the human hunting game, unaware that their own operation is beginning to attract unwanted attention. They arrive expecting an exciting experience and are given weapons, information, and a target. They do not understand the consequences because they have never been on the other side of the gun. Their wealth protects them from the reality of violence. They can treat death as entertainment because they believe they will never be victims themselves. Chance's presence challenges that belief. By fighting back, he forces the hunters to experience uncertainty. Suddenly, the people holding the weapons are no longer completely confident. They begin wondering whether the target can find them first. This reversal is one of the movie's most satisfying ideas. The hunters believe they control the game, but Chance slowly changes the rules. The more they chase him, the more they expose themselves. The more they attack him, the more he learns about them. The more they underestimate him, the more dangerous he becomes. Natasha also begins understanding the scale of the danger. What started as a search for her father has transformed into a fight against an organized group of killers. She realizes that simply finding information is not enough. They must survive long enough to expose the truth. Chance becomes the person standing between her and the people who want to silence her. Their partnership becomes increasingly emotional, and although the film is primarily an action thriller, their relationship provides a human center to the story. Chance's decision to protect Natasha shows that he is not motivated by money. In fact, his lack of interest in wealth is one of the reasons he becomes such a threat to Fouchon. Fouchon understands people through their desires. He knows how to manipulate greed, desperation, and fear. But Chance does not fit neatly into that system. He cannot easily be bought because what motivates him is not material. He wants to protect Natasha and stop people who prey on the vulnerable. That makes him unpredictable. Fouchon can understand a man who wants money because he can offer money. He can understand a man who wants power because he can offer influence. But a man willing to risk his life simply because something is wrong is much harder to control. As Chance gets closer to discovering what happened to Douglas Binder, the pressure on him and Natasha increases. They know the hunters are watching and they understand that every move could expose them. Yet they cannot stop. The truth is too important. Natasha needs to know what happened to her father, and Chance needs to make sure that the people responsible cannot continue hunting innocent victims. Their investigation eventually brings them closer to the heart of Fouchon's operation. They begin discovering more about the methods used to select targets and how the hunters are connected to the wealthy clients who pay for the experience. The organization is larger and more sophisticated than Chance initially imagined. There are people gathering information, arranging transportation, supplying weapons, managing money, and keeping the identities of the clients protected. It is essentially a criminal business built around murder. Fouchon treats the entire operation as a professional service, and this business-like attitude makes the situation even more disturbing. He does not see himself as someone participating in random violence. He sees himself as an entrepreneur providing an exclusive product. The product is human life. Chance recognizes that the only way to stop the operation is to destroy the people at the center of it. But doing that means going deeper into danger. The hunters are armed, organized, and prepared to kill. Chance has only limited resources. Natasha is not a trained fighter, and their enemies are constantly searching for them. Every advantage they gain is temporary. Every safe place can become a trap. Every clue can lead them closer to an ambush. This creates a growing sense of tension as the story moves towards its larger confrontation. Fouchon becomes increasingly obsessed with defeating Chance because his reputation is now at stake. He has built his entire identity around being the man who controls the hunt. If Chance continues surviving, Fouchon's clients may begin questioning his ability. His business depends on making wealthy customers feel powerful. A target who repeatedly escapes destroys that illusion. Fouchon therefore becomes more personally involved, and his calm businessman personality begins revealing a darker side. He is willing to sacrifice his employees, his resources, and anyone else necessary to eliminate the problem. Van Cleef shares this obsession, but for a different reason. He wants the physical satisfaction of defeating a worthy opponent. Their pursuit of Chance becomes increasingly personal. Chance, however, remains focused on Natasha and the truth. He understands that defeating one or two attackers will not solve the problem. The organization must be exposed and dismantled. This makes his mission larger than simple revenge. He wants to end the hunt itself. As part 2 moves towards its final moments, Chance and Natasha are now fully aware that they have entered a war. They are no longer running from random criminals. They are being hunted by an organized group with money, weapons, and connections. But the hunters have made a critical mistake. They have allowed Chance to survive long enough to understand how they operate. He now knows their methods, their motivations, and the weaknesses hidden behind their confidence. The prey has begun learning how to become the predator. Every failed attack strengthens Chance's determination. Every new clue confirms Natasha's worst fears. And every decision made by Fouchon pushes the two sides closer to an inevitable confrontation. The streets of New Orleans are becoming the battlefield, and the rules of the game are beginning to change. Fouchon may still believe that money gives him control. Van Cleef may still believe that physical strength makes him unbeatable. And the wealthy hunters may still believe they are participating in the ultimate sport. But Chance has something they do not have, a reason to fight that cannot be measured in money. He is fighting for a woman who refuses to abandon her father, for the victims who never had a chance to defend themselves, and for the principle that no human being should become someone's entertainment simply because another person has enough money to pay for it. The hunt has now become a war, and Chance Boudreaux is no longer trying merely to survive it. He is preparing to turn the hunt back on the hunters. The situation surrounding Chance Boudreaux and Natasha Binder has now become far more dangerous than either of them could have imagined, because their search for Douglas Binder has exposed a criminal operation that depends entirely on secrecy, fear, and the belief that wealthy people can buy absolute power. But Chance has begun destroying that illusion, one confrontation at a time. As the investigation continues, Chance realizes that the hunters are not simply trying to scare him away from Natasha. They are determined to eliminate anyone who gets close to the truth. Natasha has already lost her father, and the evidence they have uncovered suggests that Douglas became one of the victims of Emile Fouchon's underground human hunting operation, an organization that selects desperate people, gives wealthy clients the opportunity to hunt them, and then erases the evidence when the game is over. For Fouchon, the entire process is business. He carefully manages the operation, provides the hunters with weapons and information, and makes sure that the people paying for the experience never have to face the consequences of their actions. His partner, Pick Van Cleef, is the more physical side of the operation, a ruthless and confident killer who enjoys the hunt and believes that anyone standing in his way can be destroyed. But Chance is beginning to change the balance of power. He may not have the money, resources, or connections that Fouchon possesses, but he has something that the hunters have underestimated: experience. Chance is a former Marine, and years of military training have taught him that survival depends on awareness, patience, and the ability to stay calm when everyone else is losing control. The hunters are accustomed to chasing people who panic. Chance refuses to panic. When they expect him to run, he studies their position. When they expect him to surrender, he attacks. When they believe they have surrounded him, he looks for the weakest point and escapes. This ability makes him increasingly dangerous, and Fouchon begins to understand that Chance is not going to disappear simply because someone threatens him. Natasha also becomes more confident as the investigation progresses. At the beginning of the story, she arrived in New Orleans primarily because she wanted to find her father. She was determined, but she did not fully understand the environment she had entered. Now she has seen enough to know that the people responsible for her father's disappearance are extremely dangerous. Yet she refuses to stop. Her emotional connection to her father gives her a motivation that fear cannot completely destroy. Chance respects that determination, and their partnership becomes stronger. He is still reluctant to become emotionally attached to anyone, but Natasha gradually breaks through the barriers he has built around himself. Chance has spent much of his life depending on himself, avoiding unnecessary relationships and refusing to become responsible for other people's problems. Yet, helping Natasha forces him to reconsider that way of living. He discovers that protecting someone can be just as meaningful as protecting himself. As they continue following clues, they begin learning more about the victims of Fushon's operation. The targets are chosen because they are vulnerable. Some are desperate for money, some are struggling to survive, and others simply believe they have been offered legitimate work. The organization understands that desperation can make people accept risks they would normally avoid. This is what makes the operation so cruel. Fushon does not simply attack random people. He searches for individuals who are least capable of defending themselves. Then he sells their lives to men who are wealthy enough to become hunters. The entire system is built around an ugly idea that human life becomes less valuable when the person is poor. Chance completely rejects that idea. He knows what it feels like to struggle, and although he has his own flaws, he refuses to allow money to determine who deserves to live. His moral position places him directly against Fushon, whose worldview is based on the opposite belief. Fushon thinks money creates authority. Chance believes character creates strength. Fushon surrounds himself with people who can be bought. Chance relies on people who choose to stand with him. This difference becomes increasingly important as the conflict escalates. Fushon begins using more aggressive tactics against them. His men follow Chance and Natasha, watch their movements, and attempt to isolate them. Every encounter becomes a test of Chance's instincts. The action sequences become more intense because Chance is now aware that there is almost no safe place for them. He cannot simply walk away from the city because Natasha's investigation still needs answers, and the hunters are capable of following them wherever they go. Chance, therefore, decides that the best defense may be to take the fight directly to the people hunting them. Instead of waiting for another ambush, he begins looking for opportunities to attack their operation. This changes his role from defensive survivor to active hunter. The title of the movie becomes increasingly meaningful because the person being hunted is beginning to understand how to hunt. Chance uses his military skills to observe his enemies and identify patterns. He watches their vehicles, studies their movements, and learns how they approach targets. He understands that a large organization can still have weaknesses. The more people involved, the more opportunities there are for mistakes. Fushon has money, but money cannot guarantee perfection. His employees can make errors. His hunters can become careless. His clients can become unpredictable. Chance uses these weaknesses against them. At the same time, Van Cleef becomes increasingly interested in Chance as an opponent. He sees the former Marine as someone who has survived longer than expected and begins treating the conflict as a personal challenge. Van Cleef is physically intimidating, confident, and experienced in violence. He enjoys the feeling of control that comes from frightening other people. Chance represents the opposite kind of fighter. He does not enjoy violence, but he knows how to use it when necessary. Their eventual confrontation becomes inevitable because both men represent different sides of the same violent world. Van Cleef kills because he believes violence proves superiority. Chance fights because he believes violence is sometimes necessary to protect someone from people like Van Cleef. Their conflict, therefore, becomes more than a physical contest. It becomes a battle between two different motivations. One fights for domination, the other fights for survival and justice. Meanwhile, Natasha continues working with Chance to uncover the truth about her father. She begins to understand that finding Douglas may not be possible in the way she originally hoped. The evidence suggests that he was targeted as part of the hunting operation, and the realization is emotionally devastating. But Natasha refuses to allow her grief to make her powerless. Instead, it strengthens her determination. She wants the people responsible to be exposed. She wants to know exactly what happened, and she wants to prevent another family from suffering the same loss. Chance becomes her protector, but he also becomes her partner in the investigation. Their relationship develops naturally because they are forced to rely on one another. Natasha provides the emotional determination that keeps them moving forward, while Chance provides the tactical knowledge necessary to survive. They are very different people, but their differences complement each other. As they move deeper into the investigation, they discover that Fusion's operation has connections to wealthy clients who treat the Huns as exclusive entertainment. These men have become so disconnected from ordinary consequences that killing another human being is no longer horrifying to them. It is simply another thrill. The film uses these characters to explore the corrupting influence of wealth when money is combined with complete lack of accountability. The hunters have everything they could want, but because ordinary pleasures no longer satisfy them, they seek something more extreme. Their wealth allows them to escape consequences, and their privilege creates the illusion that ordinary moral rules do not apply to them. Chance's presence challenges that illusion because he refuses to be intimidated by their wealth. He does not care how expensive their weapons are or how powerful their connections may be. To him, they are simply criminals who have chosen the wrong people to attack. As the story progresses, the physical environment of New Orleans becomes increasingly important. The city provides a mixture of crowded streets, industrial areas, warehouses, abandoned buildings, and isolated locations that allow the hunters to create their dangerous games. Chance moves through these spaces with the instincts of someone trained to survive hostile environments. The movie's action style makes strong use of this environment, allowing fights and pursuits to move through different locations rather than remaining in a single setting. Jean-Claude Van Damme's physical abilities are central to these sequences. His performance combines martial arts with traditional action choreography, giving Chance a distinctive fighting style. He uses kicks, punches, throws, improvised weapons, and environmental objects to overcome opponents. His athleticism becomes particularly important because many of the hunters have firearms and numerical advantages. Chance cannot simply overpower everyone directly. He has to move quickly, create openings, and use surprise. This keeps the action focused on his intelligence as much as his physical strength. The more opponents he defeats, the more Fusion understands that conventional tactics are failing. His frustration begins to grow. A man who normally controls every detail of his operation is now watching his plans collapse because of one unpredictable opponent. Fusion starts making the mistake that powerful people often make when they become frustrated. He takes the challenge personally. Instead of treating Chance as an obstacle that can be solved logically, he begins viewing him as an insult. Chance has damaged his reputation and threatened his business, and Fusion wants revenge. This emotional shift makes Fusion more dangerous but also more vulnerable. His decisions become influenced by anger rather than strategy. Van Cleef encourages this attitude because he wants to face Chance directly. He believes that if he can defeat Chance personally, the problem will disappear. But Chance is becoming more prepared with every encounter. He understands that Van Cleef is aggressive and confident, and he knows that aggression can be used against someone who is too confident. The hunters' greatest weakness is that they have never seriously considered the possibility that their target could become the predator. Their entire system depends on maintaining psychological control. The victim is supposed to be frightened, confused, and desperate. Once that psychological advantage disappears, the game becomes much more difficult. Chance's confidence begins affecting everyone around him. Natasha becomes more willing to fight for herself. Fouchon's men become more cautious. Van Cleef becomes more obsessed. And Fouchon becomes increasingly desperate to restore control. The conflict has now moved beyond the original disappearance. It has become a battle over who controls the hunt. Chance's objective is no longer simply to survive until the authorities can help. He wants to expose the organization and stop it permanently. The hunters, meanwhile, want to eliminate Chance before he can reveal their secrets. This creates a countdown toward the final confrontation. Every new discovery pushes Chance and Natasha closer to the center of the operation, while every attack pushes Fouchon closer to making a reckless decision. One of the most important aspects of Chance's character is that he does not behave like a traditional revenge-driven hero. He is angry, but he is not consumed by hatred. He does not spend every moment talking about revenge. Instead, he focuses on what needs to be done. He knows Natasha deserves answers, and he knows the people responsible must be stopped. His calmness makes him more effective because he does not allow his emotions to control his decisions. Fouchon, on the other hand, becomes increasingly emotional as his plans fail. The contrast between the two men grows stronger with every confrontation. Chance becomes calmer as the danger increases. Fouchon becomes more reckless as the danger increases. This reversal is one of the reasons Chance begins gaining the advantage. Meanwhile, the police investigation surrounding the missing people adds another layer of pressure. Although the authorities do not initially understand the full scale of Fouchon's operation, Natasha's persistence and Chance's discoveries begin creating a trail. The criminal organization can hide individual murders, but it becomes more difficult to hide a pattern. The more victims there are, the greater the possibility that someone will notice connections between them. Fouchon understands this and knows that he cannot allow Chance to continue collecting evidence. He therefore prepares to end the problem once and for all. Chance also understands that the final confrontation is coming. He knows that running forever is impossible. Eventually, he will have to confront Fouchon and the people behind the operation. Natasha is frightened, but she refuses to abandon him. The relationship has reached a point where they trust each other completely. Chance no longer sees her as someone he simply needs to protect. He sees her as a partner who has chosen to remain in the fight despite the danger. This is important because it gives Natasha her own agency. She is not simply the helpless woman waiting for the hero to save her. She makes decisions, follows leads, confronts people, and continues searching for the truth even when doing so places her life at risk. Her determination also gives Chance an emotional reason to keep going. The more he learns about the victims, the more convinced he becomes that someone must stop the hunters. The operation has existed because people like Fouchon believe nobody will challenge them. Chance challenges them. As Part 3 moves towards its conclusion, the hunters begin losing their confidence. Their prey has survived multiple attacks, learned their methods, and started attacking them in return. Fouchon can no longer guarantee his clients a safe and exciting hunting experience because the target is now fighting back. Van Cleef is preparing for a direct confrontation, and Chance is preparing for the same encounter. Natasha is closer to discovering the full truth about her father, but the truth may come with an emotional cost she is not prepared for. The tension is now at its highest point. Every character has reached a stage where retreat is no longer possible. Fouchon cannot simply abandon his business because too much is at stake. Cliff cannot walk away because his pride is involved. Natasha cannot stop because she needs justice for her father. Chance cannot leave because he has chosen to protect her and expose the hunters. The entire conflict is moving toward a final battle. The movie's central idea has now become completely clear. The people who believed they were the hunters have created their own enemy. They chose their targets based on weakness, but they fail to understand that desperation does not always create weakness. Sometimes it creates determination. Chance may not have money, social status, or political connections, but he has courage and experience. He understands what it means to fight when the odds are against you. He understands that survival is not about having the biggest weapon. It is about refusing to give up. Fouchon built his operation around the assumption that money makes people powerless. Chance proves the opposite. A person who has nothing to lose can become extremely dangerous. And as the hunters close in for what they believe will be the final stage of their game, Chance is preparing to turn their own rules against them. The prey has learned the hunters' methods. The hunters have underestimated their target, and the final confrontation is now only a matter of time. The conflict has now reached a point where Chance Boudreau is no longer simply trying to stay alive while helping Natasha Binder search for her missing father. He has become the greatest threat Emile Fouchon's entire operation has ever faced, and the closer Chance gets to the truth, the more desperate Fouchon becomes to destroy him. What began as a search through the streets of New Orleans has turned into a war between a former Marine who refuses to let innocent people become prey and a wealthy criminal mastermind who has spent years building a secret business around the darkest form of entertainment imaginable. Fouchon has always depended on control. He chooses the victims, arranges the hunts, supplies the weapons, coordinates the hunters, and makes sure that his wealthy clients feel powerful from beginning to end. His success has been based on the idea that everyone involved is predictable. The victims are supposed to panic, the hunters are supposed to win, and the clients are supposed to walk away satisfied. But Chance has destroyed that formula. He does not behave like a frightened victim, and every time Fouchon sends someone after him, Chance learns something new about the organization. He has begun turning the hunters' own confidence against them, and now Fouchon knows that the only way to protect his operation is to eliminate Chance before he can expose everything. Natasha, meanwhile, has reached the painful realization that her father's disappearance is connected directly to the hunting operation. Her journey began with hope that she could find Douglas alive, but the evidence has gradually forced her to confront the possibility that her father was one of the people sacrificed for the entertainment of Fouchon's clients. Instead of giving up, Natasha becomes even more determined. She wants the truth, but she also wants justice. Chance understands what that means because he has watched the same organization destroy other vulnerable people. His decision to help Natasha is no longer temporary. He has made it personal. He has seen enough of Fouchon's world to know that if they simply walk away, someone else will become the next target. This is why Chance begins taking the fight directly toward the organization. Rather than constantly reacting to attacks, he starts thinking like a soldier again. He studies the enemy, watches their movements, identifies their patterns, and looks for the weaknesses hidden behind their apparent strength. His military training becomes increasingly important because the people hunting him have resources that he does not possess. They have firearms, vehicles, money, and multiple men working together, while Chance has limited equipment and Natasha at his side. But Chance understands something the hunters do not. Resources are useless when the person using them lacks discipline. The wealthy hunters may have expensive weapons, but they are accustomed to controlling the environment. They are not prepared for an opponent who can disappear into that environment and use it against them. Chance moves through New Orleans with a survival instinct that allows him to turn ordinary locations into tactical advantages. A vehicle becomes a weapon, a narrow passage becomes a trap, a building becomes cover, and darkness becomes protection. He does not need to defeat everyone at once. He only needs to survive long enough to separate his enemies and strike when they are vulnerable. This is exactly what begins happening as Fouchon's men continue pursuing him. Each encounter becomes more difficult for the hunters because Chance has stopped thinking like prey. He knows they expect him to run in predictable directions, so he changes his movements. He knows they will search the obvious locations, so he uses less obvious routes. He understands that armed men often become careless when they believe they have already won, and he waits for those moments. His opponents repeatedly discover that the man they thought they were chasing is actually controlling the situation. This transformation is central to Chance's character. At the beginning of the movie, he was a drifter trying to survive from one job to another, seemingly disconnected from the world around him. Now his military instincts have returned, but he is using them for a completely different purpose. He is not fighting for an army or following orders from a superior officer. He is fighting because he has chosen to protect someone and stop a criminal operation. That difference gives his actions a personal meaning. He is finally using the skills he once wanted to leave behind for something he believes is worth fighting for. Natasha also changes during this part of the story. At first, she depended heavily on Chance because she had entered a dangerous city without understanding the people she was dealing with. Now she has learned how to recognize danger and how to respond under pressure. She remains vulnerable, but she is no longer helpless. She asks questions, follows evidence, confronts people who may know something about her father, and refuses to allow fear to control her decisions. Her relationship with Chance becomes stronger because they have survived enough together to trust each other's judgment. Chance does not simply tell her what to do anymore. He listens to her information and allows her to participate in the investigation. Natasha's determination also reminds Chance that this fight is about more than himself. Every time he thinks about walking away, he remembers what happened to Douglas and the other victims. He knows that Fouchon will continue if nobody stops him. The operation is too profitable and too carefully organized to disappear on its own. The only way to end it is to expose the people responsible. Fouchon, however, has no intention of allowing that to happen. His frustration has begun changing him. The calm businessman who once seemed completely in control is becoming more aggressive and personal. Chance has embarrassed him. He has defeated his men, disrupted his hunts, frightened his clients, and created the possibility that his secret could become public. Fouchon's greatest fear is not simply losing money. It is losing control. His entire identity is based on being the person who decides who hunts and who gets hunted. Chance has taken that control away from him. The irony is that Fouchon has spent years creating a game in which powerful men pay to hunt helpless victims. But now he has encountered someone who refuses to accept the role of victim. Instead of running forever, Chance has begun hunting the hunters. This reversal makes Fouchon increasingly reckless. He starts relying more heavily on Van Cleef, believing that physical force can solve the problem. Van Cleef has been waiting for an opportunity to confront Chance directly. Unlike Fouchon, who thinks primarily in terms of business and control, Van Cleef enjoys the violence itself. He sees Chance as a challenge and wants to prove that he is the superior fighter. His confidence is dangerous because he has spent years successfully defeating people who were not prepared to fight back. Chance is different. His combat training allows him to recognize Van Cleef's aggression and use it against him. Their eventual confrontation becomes inevitable, and both men know that when it happens, it will not be an ordinary fight. Van Cleef wants domination. Chance wants survival. Van Cleef wants to prove his superiority. Chance wants to protect Natasha and destroy Fouchon's operation. The emotional stakes are therefore very different. While Fouchon and Van Cleef focus on defeating Chance, Chance remains focused on the larger objective. He understands that killing one man will not end the problem. The organization has multiple participants, wealthy clients, informants, and people who help arrange the hunts. The system itself must be destroyed. Natasha's investigation helps them understand how deeply connected the operation is. The victims are selected through information gathered by Fouchon's people, and the hunters are given enough details to track their targets efficiently. The victims are essentially being delivered into a carefully designed battlefield without knowing the rules. Once the hunt begins, their survival depends on luck, instinct, and courage. Chance recognizes how unfair the system is, and this makes his determination even stronger. He does not see the hunters as skilled sportsmen. He sees them as cowards who need enormous advantages before they are willing to face another human being. Their wealth allows them to choose the battlefield, bring weapons, hire assistants, and eliminate evidence. Chance wants to remove those advantages. He wants to force them into a situation where they have to fight without the protection of money and organization. The action throughout this stage becomes increasingly intense, with Chance facing multiple attackers while trying to keep Natasha alive. The physical choreography is a major part of the movie's identity, and Jean-Claude Van Damme's athletic performance gives Chance a distinctive style. His fights combine martial arts kicks, powerful strikes, grappling, movement, and improvised techniques. But what makes these sequences effective is that Chance rarely fights simply for spectacle. Each fight has a purpose. He may need to escape, protect Natasha, obtain information, or prevent the hunters from reaching another target. His physical ability is therefore connected to the story rather than existing only as decoration. The film also uses the action to show the difference between Chance and his enemies. The hunters rely heavily on firearms and numbers, while Chance relies on mobility and close-range skill. They believe distance gives them power, but Chance understands that distance can also make them dependent on their weapons. If he can get close enough, their advantage becomes smaller. This creates several tense confrontations where Chance must close the distance between himself and armed opponents. His speed and unpredictability allow him to do what ordinary people could not. Meanwhile, Natasha becomes increasingly aware that Chance is risking his life for her. She begins to understand that the tough exterior he presents is partly a defense mechanism. Chance does not talk much about his past, but his actions reveal that he has a strong moral code. He has experienced violence before, and perhaps that is one reason he recognizes the evil in Fouchon's operation so clearly. He knows what real combat is like. He understands that death is not entertainment. The wealthy hunters have never experienced violence in the same way. They are playing a game because they believe they can walk away afterward. Chance knows that once a weapon is fired, there is no game. Someone dies. This difference in perspective makes his conflict with Fouchon more meaningful. Fouchon has turned killing into a commercial product. Chance is determined to remind him that every victim is a human being. As the investigation moves forward, the possibility of exposing the operation becomes stronger. Evidence begins accumulating, and Fouchon knows that secrecy is his greatest protection. If the authorities discover the full scale of the hunting operation, his wealthy clients could be exposed and the entire business could collapse. This is why he cannot simply allow Natasha to continue investigating. She has become a threat because she refuses to stop asking questions. Chance has become an even greater threat because he can physically prevent Fouchon's men from silencing her. Fouchon therefore decides to increase the pressure and force the confrontation. His strategy is to overwhelm Chance with enough attackers that even his military training will not be enough. But Fouchon fails to understand that Chance is not fighting alone emotionally. Natasha's presence gives him a reason to continue even when he is exhausted or injured. Every time he is knocked down, he gets back up because he knows that giving up would leave Natasha vulnerable. This determination becomes one of his greatest strengths. The hunters are fighting for money and entertainment. Chance is fighting for something he believes is right. The movie increasingly presents this contrast through the way the characters behave under pressure. When the wealthy hunters become frightened, they look for escape or protection. When Chance is frightened, he becomes more focused. His fear does not disappear, but he knows how to control it. This is a quality developed through military training and experience. He understands that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to continue despite fear. Fouchon's arrogance prevents him from understanding this. He believes that fear can control everyone because fear has always controlled his victims. Chance proves otherwise. Another important element of the story is the question of power. Fouchon believes power comes from money, connections, weapons, and the ability to control other people. Chance demonstrates that power can also come from courage, loyalty, and determination. Fouchon can buy men to work for him, but he cannot buy Chance's loyalty. He can threaten Natasha, but that threat only makes Chance more determined. He can use weapons, but Chance's experience allows him to survive against them. The more Fouchon tries to control the situation, the more he discovers that Chance cannot be controlled. This becomes the psychological battle underneath the physical action. Fouchon is trying to prove that nobody can challenge him. Chance is proving that one person can stand against an entire system if he refuses to be intimidated. As the final stages of the story approach, the conflict becomes increasingly direct. Chance and Natasha are moving toward the people at the center of the operation, while Fouchon is gathering the remaining forces he has available. Van Cleef becomes the most immediate physical threat. Their confrontation has been building throughout the movie, and both men are now prepared for it. Chance knows that Van Cleef is dangerous and will not fight fairly. Van Cleef knows that Chance is unlike the other targets he has encountered. He respects Chance's ability, but that respect only increases his desire to defeat him. Their conflict therefore becomes personal. Van Cleef wants to prove that he is the better fighter, while Chance wants to stop him from hurting Natasha. The difference in motivation could determine the outcome. Chance does not need to prove anything. He simply needs to survive. That gives him a psychological advantage because he is not fighting for pride. Van Cleef's ego, however, may make him take unnecessary risks. At the same time, Fouchon's operation begins showing signs of collapse. The secrecy that protected it is weakening, the hunters are no longer completely confident, and the presence of Chance has created chaos. A business built on controlled violence cannot survive when its own people begin making mistakes. Fouchon's carefully organized world is starting to fall apart because he underestimated one man. The wealthy clients who once believed they were purchasing an exciting and controlled experience are now exposed to the possibility that the violence could turn against them. The hunters who once laughed while chasing helpless victims now have to consider whether they might become targets themselves. This is the ultimate reversal of the movie's premise. The people who created the game are beginning to fear the game. Chance has transformed their greatest weapon, fear, into something that works against them. Natasha, meanwhile, is approaching the truth about her father. The emotional weight of her journey becomes heavier as she realizes that the answers she has been searching for may not be the answers she wanted. But she continues because knowing the truth is better than living with uncertainty. Chance stays beside her because he understands that justice sometimes requires confronting painful realities. Their partnership has now become the emotional center of the story. They are no longer simply two strangers who met because of a missing person case. They have become allies who have survived danger together and share a common goal. Chance's transformation from isolated drifter to protector is one of the most important character developments in the film. He begins the story as someone who prefers to keep his distance from other people's problems. By this stage, he is willing to risk everything for someone else. His journey demonstrates that his military past did not only give him fighting skills, it also gave him a strong understanding of loyalty, responsibility, and sacrifice. Those qualities were buried beneath his rough lifestyle, but Natasha's situation brings them back to the surface. He discovers that protecting someone else gives his life a sense of purpose that he had been missing. Fouchon, on the other hand, becomes increasingly isolated. His obsession with control has left him surrounded by people who work for money rather than loyalty. When the situation becomes dangerous, he cannot rely on genuine trust. The people around him follow orders because they are paid to do so, and that becomes a weakness. Chance has Natasha because she chooses to stay with him. Fouchon has employees because he pays them. The difference becomes important when the stakes rise. The story is now moving rapidly toward its final confrontation, and the audience can feel that there is no longer any possibility of a peaceful resolution. Too much has happened, too many people have been hurt. Natasha has learned too much to simply walk away. Chance has become too dangerous for Fouchon to ignore. Fouchon has committed too much to allow himself to be exposed. Van Cleef wants his final fight. Everyone is moving toward the same point. The hunt that Fouchon created as entertainment for wealthy men has now become a deadly battle in which the hunters themselves are fighting for survival. Chance understands that the only way to end the nightmare is to destroy the organization at its source. He is no longer thinking about escaping New Orleans. He is thinking about making sure Fouchon cannot continue. As Chance prepares for the final stage, he carries the scars of everything that has happened, but he is still standing. His body is tired, his resources are limited, and the odds remain against him. Yet, his determination is stronger than ever. Fouchon still believes he can win because he has always won. But chance represents the one thing Fouchon's world cannot tolerate: unpredictability. A system built on control becomes fragile when someone refuses to follow its rules. Chance has refused from the beginning. He was never supposed to survive. He was never supposed to uncover the truth. He was never supposed to become a threat. But now he is standing directly in front of the organization, and the final battle is unavoidable. The wealthy hunters wanted the ultimate thrill by turning human beings into prey, but they have created an enemy who knows exactly how to hunt them. The man they thought would run is now coming for them. The man they thought they could buy cannot be bought. The man they thought they could frighten has learned how to use their fear against them. And as Chance and Natasha move closer to the heart of Fouchon's operation, the story reaches the point where every secret, every betrayal, and every act of violence is about to collide in one final struggle. The hunt is no longer a game, and the people who created it are about to discover that there is a price for treating human life as entertainment. The final stage of Chance Boudreau's battle against Émile Fouchon's human hunting operation begins with the realization that there is no longer anywhere left to hide, because the investigation has exposed too much. Natasha Binder has come too close to the truth about her father, and Chance has become such a serious threat that Fouchon can no longer afford to treat him as an ordinary obstacle. What began as a search for one missing man has now developed into a direct assault on an entire criminal system, and Chance understands that the only way to end the danger is to confront the people responsible. Fouchon, meanwhile, has become increasingly desperate, because the foundation of his business depends on secrecy and control, and Chance has damaged both. His wealthy clients once arrived in New Orleans believing they could purchase the ultimate hunting experience, confident that their money would keep them protected from consequences. But the appearance of Chance has changed everything. The target, who was supposed to run in fear, has become an experienced fighter, capable of turning the hunters' own tactics against them. Fouchon knows that if Chance survives long enough to expose the operation, the entire organization could collapse, and the wealthy men who have paid for his services could become witnesses against him. For a man who has always believed that money can solve every problem, this is an unfamiliar situation. Money can buy weapons, vehicles, information, and people willing to work for him, but it cannot guarantee that Chance will stop fighting. It cannot erase the evidence Natasha has discovered. It cannot bring back the victims, and it cannot make Chance afraid. This is why Fouchon begins preparing for the confrontation with a level of determination he has not shown before. He understands that Chance is not going to surrender, so he decides that the only remaining option is to destroy him completely. Chance,